Welcome to the Modern Medicine Movement Podcast with Dr. Thomas Hemingway. Have you ever looked in the mirror and said to yourself, I thought I'd be healthier, in better shape, feel better both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and be further along in my life? If so, come on this journey with my dad as he explores all things health and wellness from a holistic medical perspective, even as a classically trained physician. He'll share integrative strategies to optimize health and inspire you to join the modern medicine movement.
Welcome to the Modern Medicine Movement podcast, and a big aloha. Dr. Thomas Hemingway here, and I'm pumped and I'm grateful just to be here with you guys. Thank you for allowing me into your day and just allowing me to share some of the pearls that I've learned with you, because it's just all about, how we can maximize and optimize each and every day so that we feel good, so that we have good energy, so that we're not achy and just smoldering along in life with brain fog and just feeling like doo-doo, right? We want to feel good. We want to be pumped. We want to be energetic. We want to have the health that we've always dreamed of so we can enjoy our time here with our families and friends and those we want to be around. So thank you for allowing me to share with you a few things. I'm so pumped. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you who listens, and especially you guys who have written reviews, because that's what gets the good word out. So if you haven't already, please, especially out on Apple Podcast land, if you're there, scroll down to the bottom of the show, hit the 5 stars farthest to the right, click on the button below, and click on that and write a review, just like this sweet gal Diana S. did recently. Thank you, Diana. I just read your review and loved it. She gives me 5 stars and says, quote, love your enthusiasm, ! Thank you for telling me what to eat, not don't eat. I do try to focus more on the do's than the don'ts. There are some don'ts out there, and we do talk about them, but I love to inspire and educate and tell you what you can do. There's so much we can do. So thank you, Diana S., for this awesome 5-star review. She says also, I share your podcast with those I love. Thank you for helping me understand so much! ! All right. Diana S., thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. All you guys who share these with your friends and family, I'm tickled. I love that, because there's so much here that can really change our lives for the better. And most of it's pretty simple. And although oftentimes common sense, like I learned as a kid, unfortunately is not that common. And the things that I teach and share are pretty simple, often somewhat commonsensical, but they're based in the evidence. It's not just my soapbox here. This is evidence-based, good stuff that will help us to live that optimal life that we all desire, of our bodies with that energy that we've always craved, with our minds being clear and sharp and focused, to be healthy with respect to our emotions, right? That's a big part of this too. And so we focus on all these things, and I'm so grateful to share this with you. If you haven't already, you can join my free Facebook group. It's Modern Medicine Movement Health and Wellness Facebook group. I like to share with you guys first whenever I release a new show. Also, we'll do lives in that group, talk about health topics, often ones that you guys have asked about. I love your feedback. You can reach out to me there. You can reach out to me on Instagram at Aloha Surf Doc, or at Modern Medicine Movement Podcast on Insta, as well as on Facebook. As well as you can do the old school thing of email. I have it's a Modern Medicine Movement Podcast at gmail.com. So you can reach out to me there. I have a website, modernmedicinemovement.com. So reach out to me. Let me know what questions or things you want to be learning about in future shows. I love to talk about what you guys want to hear about. So keep the feedback coming. Once again, please write a review, and please feel free to share. That's how we keep keep doing this and keep other people recognizing and noticing that there's lots of good information out there. So share, and share like. So, hey, today's podcast is something that I think you'll find really interesting. It's something that, has come up to me many times over the years, and some of it I discovered sort of by accident, and most of it just by reading a whole heck of a lot and doing a lot of research on it. But what's super interesting about this topic is that it is more than a $432 billion industry. Like, holy crap. Don't worry, none of those billions or millions or even single dollar bills are coming my way talking about this. It's just something that most of us have an interest in. And that topic has to do with sleep and circadian biology. Just last year alone, people spent over $432 billion on things related to sleep. And guess what? Almost 1 in 3 people don't sleep well. And more than, 20% of us have a legit insomnia type diagnosis. So it's a big problem, although we're spending billions of dollars on sleep stuff, right? I mean, how many things can you think of, let's say in the last 10 years, that you've recognized have been marketed specifically for sleep, right? The special, super duper awesome, comfortable pillow, the sleep pillow, or the sleep mattress, or the cooling pad, or the optimal sleep shades that you put over your eyes, or, the blue light blocking glasses to wear at night, or all these different apps out there that track our sleep, or the Oura Ring, or whatever. I mean, it's not easy to recognize how this got to be a $432 billion industry. Like, holy crap. And the sucky part is most of us still don't sleep that well. And the problem is, just to state super, super simply, is all of these sleep aids and devices and, pillows and mattresses and cooling pads and all these kinds of things, although there's some little nuance to it that might help a little bit, for the most part, I hate to say it, we are completely missing the mark. There is one thing and one thing only that affects our sleep pattern, our biological clock, if you will, our circadian rhythm, more than anything, more than all of these dozens and dozens of things that are marketed to us daily. That one thing, can you guess it? It's actually free, that one thing. And it's how we use it that will determine the quality of our sleep. Anybody know what that one thing is? It's light. Light. Simple, simple, simple. Light is what affects our circadian biology, our circadian rhythm more than anything. And so all these little sleep aids that are out there that are generating billions of dollars in revenue that are kind of cute, and all these apps and all these things that are out there counting or trying to count, our sleep and the quality of it. The one thing that affects it more than anything is the simplest thing, right? The Occam's razor approach, right? The simplest solution is probably correct. And that is the fact that light, when done right, will optimize our sleep more than anything, because that is what basically sets our 24-hour clock, or our circadian rhythm, if you will. And what's interesting about this is that, our bodies have within us their own clock, if you will, the innate, circadian rhythm or biological clock that we have within us is common to most living things, including, believe it or not, the bacteria that live on us and in us and within us and in our guts. And they have a circadian rhythm as well. And so if we can optimize ours, so will they. And they can even work better for us and us for them. And the symbiosis will be enhanced. So light, let's talk a little bit about it just to kind of set the tone and figure out, what the heck is why is it so important anyway? Well, it's actually, what's interesting about this is that the biggest discovery with respect to the circadian clock or circadian rhythm was actually something pretty recent. In fact, admittedly, more recent than my studies in college and even medical school. We didn't even talk about this stuff because it hadn't fully been appreciated and discovered yet. Well, what we now know is that we have within our retina, right, a specific type of cells that detects, basically light. They're called the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, okay? The IPSRGCs. You don't have to memorize that, but these light-sensitive cells are not what we used to think. See, what's interesting about this is, even blind people that can't even see the light, typically speaking, these photosensitive retinal ganglion cells are working and are operational. So it's even important for the blind person to have the right amount of light coming in during the right timing to set their biological clocks. Isn't that interesting? Super stinking interesting, I think. And these cells in the back of our retina, they connect with this suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus. And I think this has kind of been a buzzword lately, this suprachiasmatic nucleus. And really all it is it's basically found in, the hypothalamus, which largely governs our circadian rhythm. The hypothalamus is so important for all of our hormonal processes, these kind of communication processes that take in these visual cues, or actually non-visual cues as it really is, because these retinal cells are actually taking in the light, but they're different than the rods and the cones that allow us to see, so to speak. So this area, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is under the hypothalamic control, is super important because it then communicates with this little tiny gland called the pineal gland. It's like this little tiny grape that's kind of in that region close by to the hypothalamus. And what that gland does, many of us have heard of that hormone called melatonin, right? Some of us have even tried it. We've actually tried to take melatonin from time to time to help us sleep. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the podcast. But what happens naturally is that this pineal gland gets, the messages from the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus telling it whether or not to release melatonin, right? So during the day, when all that light is coming in, the bright lights of the outdoors, hopefully we're getting some of that good old-fashioned vitamin N or nature, right? Hopefully we're getting some natural light coming in. For me right now, where I am located up in the mountains, it's stinking cold outside, so I still try to get some bright light a couple hours a day, but some of that bright light I'm just getting right through the window because it's cold. It was 4 degrees when I got up this morning, and holy crap, I got out there, and when I came in, I think my kids and I lasted about 2 hours. Like, we were numb from head to toe. We couldn't feel our fingers, we couldn't feel our toes because it was 4 degrees leaving the house and 8 degrees coming back in. And as good as the snow was, it was still stinking cold. So getting that natural light to basically hit those photosensitive cells at the back of our retina, these intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, will send that message to the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, basically then telling the pineal gland, hey, don't release melatonin. It's daytime. It's daylight. We need to be up. We need to be awake. We need to be doing stuff, right? We need to be alert. And this process has been around for millennia, right? Way before we had all these blue light things like cell phones and tablets and televisions and, all of these flashing lights that are all over the place screwing us up. We didn't have any of this stuff back in the day. So we literally had this dialed in. Our circadian rhythm was optimized when we basically just operated off natural daylight. Because when the sun goes down, guess what happens? Now, the pineal gland is no longer inhibited by the signals coming from the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus. It's not being inhibited anymore. It's being basically allowed to release the melatonin. So as sunset occurs and lights are dimming, our pineal gland is getting a signal, hey, it's not daytime anymore. We can start to kind of wind down a little bit. We can start to release the melatonin. And that helps us get to sleep at night, right? It's awesome. And it's natural and it's normal. And in some cases, we might need a little bit of this to help reset our clocks a little bit, especially if we have to travel and we're crossing multiple time zones and things like that. We can benefit from a little bit of melatonin to, reset our so-called biological clock or our circadian rhythm. And what I find is so interesting about all of this and all of the sleep aids and apps and devices and all these things that we talked about a little bit at the outset is, for the most part, they are completely missing the mark as far as the biggest and most important factor in our health with respect to our sleep and circadian rhythm has to do with our exposure to light, right? So if there's one thing that you take home today, tonight, or whenever you hear this, it's about the importance of the correct timing of light in your life. And for me, this has been challenging. Over the last 20 years, I've been working in hospitals and primarily in the ERs, and there is a plethora of blue light happening in those facilities 24/7 for the most part. Like, legit, we are getting flooded with blue light at all hours, day and night. And so if you have to work the night shift, whatever your work may be, there's going to be some techniques that I'll talk about later in the show, how you can kind of optimize your sleep, because this is the biggest cue. This light is the biggest cue, and it can be both natural light, preferably if we can work on a regular schedule where we're up during the day and we're working and exposed to natural light, and we're getting the right signals hitting our retinal ganglion cells, which are then going to the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, and they're blocking the melatonin during the day, and then the light dims down at sunset, and we're kind of setting the tone for the evening and whatnot, and that can all happen naturally. Fantastic. But I know for me, there's many times, especially if I'm working night shift or even if I'm working on a project or something, I'm having to stay up late. Once the kids are in bed, I actually get a little bit of quiet time to crank on some projects, and either that or getting up really early when it may still be dark outside. So sometimes we have to, use some things to help us in this respect that aren't necessarily just the natural light that we were designed to respond to. But the short story is, light is the most important trigger, right? That will basically tell us what to do. Either get ready for bed because the light is diminishing, right? Or to be up and awake and at it and doing stuff because we have a plethora of either natural light or blue light. So what's interesting is that this blue spectrum of light, it's a certain wavelength. It's actually the biggest trigger in setting our clocks or our circadian rhythm. It's that part of the visible light that we see that's, these cells, these retinal ganglion cells that I talked about are sensitive to. It's because it changes this protein that's in there. It's called melanopsin, and it recognizes this, and it basically, the blue light is what sets the clock. And what's so interesting about it is once we set that biological clock or our circadian rhythm with this light pathway, it then begins to interact with every system, every cell of our whole body, because we were designed to operate off of a circadian clock, right? A roughly 24-hour clock. That's how we were designed to operate. Now, you don't have to get too technical on this blue light thing. I mean, if you want to know, it's around 480 nanometers. And so if you're thinking into, maybe purchasing one of these in vogue kind of blue light blocking glasses. You want to take a look and see if it actually blocks the blue light, like it's, not just a pair of shades that's super expensive, right? You want to make sure it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. So you want to take a look at the label and see if it actually blocks that wavelength of light, which is around 480 nanometers. There's a couple of good ones out there, some better than others. I don't personally, I don't want to tell you buy this one and not that one, and I'm not being sponsored by any of them. I would just say do your homework. The cheapest set of glasses out there may not be the best ones. There are some that are better than others, but specifically you got to look for the ones that block that wavelength around 480 nanometers, especially if you have to be up later than you might want to because you got to work on a project or you got to work late and you're staring at a computer. I definitely recommend getting a pair of these blue light blocking glasses, as well as, setting your either computer or phone or iPad, whatever you're working on, to that kind of evening mode where it's, not so bright. It's got the black screen and the white letters that aren't so bright, that kind of thing. So you can do the dark mode, so to speak, on your screens. That is helpful. But honestly, if at all possible, just trying to be able to get your body in the groove of the natural light during the day and then kind of toning down with the blue lights at night is even better for your sleep quality than all these other things, that you'll hear about in my other podcasts on sleep, the temperature of the room and the, all these other things that come into play. Because the one thing that resets our clock is not the temperature of the bedroom, but the light exposure and the timing of it. So super, super interesting. This is all due to that special retinal cell, right? That has the melanopsin that is able to absorb that 480 nanometer blue light spectrum and basically kind of sets this whole thing for us. And what I think is so fascinating is that, think about when this doesn't go right. I think many of us may live in climates where we may not get a lot of light at certain times of the year. I have friends in Alaska, for example, and the wintertime, like now, they're getting less bright light than they will come summer. And there's other places too that don't see a lot of bright light. Let's just pick, I hate to pick on one place, but I got relatives that live in Portland, for example. I know Seattle's got a similar weather pattern, but they have basically all day, every day in the winter, just kind of a gray, kind of foggy, kind of, weather. And, I visited there. I once was out there interviewing for a job, and they were on like day, I forget, 100 something of consecutive rain. I mean, it was ridiculous. They basically have sort of that gray tone all day long. They're not getting bright light naturally. And there are many people that suffer from, what's called seasonal affective disorder. And it's more common in these places where they don't have bright light exposure in the wintertime so much, either because of their location or the weather patterns, like I mentioned in the Northwest, for example, the Pacific Northwest, where they got lots of rain and kind of gray skies and things like that. And I think intuitively that all makes sense, right? It's like when things are bright, and you're exposed to bright lights outside at the proper time during the day. I mean, it does, for me, I don't know about you. I mean, does it elevate your mood when you look outside and the sun is out, it's shining bright and it's beautiful? Does it? For me, it does. That's probably why I've lived in Hawaii for 20-something years, because it's sunny most of the time. We don't have a lot of seasonal affective disorder over there. But at the moment, I'm in the mountains where it's cold and we don't have the same bright light. But I can tell you, when we've had, like a nice snowstorm, and then the next day is that perfectly clear so-called bluebird day with the powder on the ground and it's sunny and bright, like, few things are more enjoyable, right, than just a beautiful day. Heck, my wife, she doesn't even ski, and she loves to just look outside and see that beautiful, snow covering the trees and the mountains. And if it's a bluebird day, she gets out there, in the teens of degrees, and she's out there running, even though it's winter, because it's important, right, to move our bodies. But the bottom line is natural light, if at all possible, sets this pattern. right? Light during the daytime is good. It's good not only for what I talk about a lot, my favorite vitamin, right? Vitamin D, which is amazing, which also is super helpful both for immunity. It's also been shown to have some antidepressant effects. Vitamin D is awesome, and that we can get in the light during the day. But also the light is important for setting our circadian clock, setting that so that we, are operating on the right rhythm, not only sort of our activities and things like that, but all of our other cellular and biological processes are affected by this. Like, it's crazy, down to the, microbiome that lives on us, within us, and about us. It's affected by it as well. So it's super, super interesting. And one of the studies that came out, it's a little old now, back in 2007, but it got me interested in this topic, was that the International Agency for Research on Cancer basically came out, and they came down hard on shift workers like me, because they found that the circadian disruption, or the chrono disruption, was actually, when they looked at all the data, it looked like it could be considered a probable carcinogen, because disrupting this cycle is not good. It's not good for our bodies to be disrupted. And when they are, it puts us at risk for all kinds of issues, right? Everything from obesity to type 2 diabetes, hypertension, kidney disease, heart disease, cancers, everything from breast, colon, lung, also liver problems, insomnia, of course, right? Depression issues, anxiety, all these things, even things like miscarriage and infertility, can be increased with disruptions of the circadian rhythm. Like, holy crap, who knew that getting around light during the day and getting away from it at night would be so stinking helpful? Like, it just sounds too easy, right? Too simple. Well, it is really, really simple, and that's kind of why I like it so much, because I like to keep it simple. And so even if we can't get outside during the day, we need to be exposed to bright lights indoors during the day. If you want to know the exact number, it's 200 equivalents of the lux, L-U-X. That's kind of the value. You want to be exposed to this during the day between the hours of 9 a.m. and say 2 p.m. You want to have a bright workstation, right? Because that's what kind of helps set your clock. And then in the evening, you don't necessarily want to be around the super duper bright light. In fact, a little hack that I sort of found out 20 plus years ago when I was a med student, and my wife would just trip on this, because I legit would go to the hardware store. This was, way before LED lights and fancy fluorescent lighting and whatever. It was just incandescent light, right? I would buy the brightest light, it was like 100 plus watts, and I would put multiple lights, above my head, and just make the room as bright as possible. Like, I was really good at both staying awake while I was studying, but also completely screwing up my circadian rhythm. And I didn't totally appreciate all that at the time, because like I said, when I was in med school, they hadn't even identified this melanopsin yet that's in the posterior, retinal cells. They hadn't even identified that yet. So I didn't know anything about this, importance of the timing of my light therapy, or just the light that I was receiving. And I was jacking myself up by staying up with this super bright light, because it helped me to be alert and to be focused, because my body thought it was freaking 12 noon and it might have been 12 midnight. So although I was able to stay up and study, then when I turned out the light, I didn't have time to be able to, go into that gradual process of the sunset, if you will, right? Where the melatonin gets released from the pineal gland, and that kind of starts the nocturnal portion of the circadian clock. I didn't give my body a chance to adapt to that. So I was kind of screwing myself up, but we didn't appreciate that at that time. And what I've learned since is that, the bright light during the day when we're supposed to be up, or what have you, or if we're night shift workers, bright light during the night while we're at work, and then having, blackout curtains at home to sleep and all this kind of stuff. If we have to flip-flop it, that's actually really important, right? And so one of the, I would say, most important things that we can do, is is by trying hard to eliminate that blue light at night when we're trying to wind down. I would say if you can do it, 3 hours before bedtime, try to shut that down. Like, that's kind of hard. Some of us like to be up doing stuff, and I do too. So you know what I did? Super simple. It's super cheap. It's not expensive. I bought one of these headlamps that not only has the white light setting, but it has the red light, setting. And so basically at night, I can sit up in bed and use my red light from the headlamp, and it doesn't jack up my circadian rhythm so much because it doesn't have that 480 nanometer spectrum that the blue light has. And so red light is better at bedtime. And nowadays, there's a whole market for this, and I'm not going to promote any one company, but there's light bulbs that you can get that you can use at night in your homes. And there's even, sort of a master control, you can do all this wirelessly if you have a quote unquote smart home. And my home is not. I don't have all this stuff. But if you want to get like really into it, geek out on it, like I have a few friends that are totally into this and they geek out on it, like you can do it. I mean, there's apps to do it. There's, wireless lighting that you can set up to have the red light at night and then, the bright lights in the day. And I'm just, maybe one day I'll have that. I'm not saying I won't, but for now I just try to keep it real simple and try to avoid screen time at night if at all possible. If I have to, I try to wear some blue light blocking glasses. I try to use the night mode on my computer or my iPad or whatever. And then I try to, if you can't shut it down 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, at least give yourself 1 hour before bedtime where you're not staring at a screen. I promise you, you will be amazed at how much better your sleep will be. Like, legit, take the test. Take the challenge. Just do it, right? Turn off all your devices at least 1 hour before bedtime, okay? If you want to stay up and read like I often do, I know a lot of you folks might know my wife likes to work often at night as well, so she'll kind of put her thing on the dark, nighttime mode, and she may be working and I'll be reading, and I'll just use that little headlamp, so we don't have to have the room light on. And that little red light from my headlamp, it's enough light to easily read, on a page. I like the old school, paper books. I still love to turn the pages and read a paper book, especially I like to at night, just kind of wind down for the evening. And I would say, if at all possible, try to just decrease your screen time or just limit it altogether. Ideally 3 hours before bed, but 1 to 2 hours, if you just can't, do the full 3 hours, 1 to 2 hours, and try to use some red light. If you want to be up doing stuff, that's not a bad option. And, one of these headlamps is like $15. It's pretty cheap. It has the red light option. I think I just got mine. I think it was around $15. Anyway, as mentioned, there are times where we might need to help our body a little bit, like with a melatonin supplement, for example. And I try to mostly reserve this for when I'm traveling, because that's when we get totally jacked up as far as time zones and things like that. There's even apps out there specifically that help you adjust, to the new time zone. And I don't have any stock in any of them. But you can check them out. There's a few of them out there that will help you adjust sort of circadian rhythm to the new time zone, which I think is pretty genius, because at the end of the day, that's what you want to do. You want to adjust to that new time zone, be in the light when it's light outside, and toning it down in the evening. And so if you want to check out one of these apps out there, there are several of them that help with circadian rhythm. That's not a bad idea, especially if you have to travel a lot. And if you also want to, take melatonin for travel, I think that's fine, but try to use the smallest effective dose, right? Because, you don't want to overdo it and then be groggy the next day. So I would say most of the supplements out there, you got to read the labels, because most of them have more melatonin than you really need. I would go to one of the smaller dose ones, like 2 milligram or even 1 milligram. And just start small, start with 1 milligram. When it's evening time, right? You're not supposed to take it during the day. You're not supposed to take it. You're supposed to take it in the new location when it's evening time so that your body can adjust to having your own pineal gland, secrete melatonin at that appropriate time. And so I would stay with the lower dose if at all possible. You can buy stuff up to 10 milligrams online pretty easily, but maybe start with 1 or 2 milligrams and give yourself a couple of days to kind of adjust, and see how it goes. There's other stuff that you can try as well, things like lavender and so on that can help kind of mellow you out at night. Take a bath, all these things that kind of relax us. But remember, at the end of the day, the most crucial, the most important, and the biggest factor in our sleep and circadian rhythm is light. 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 Like, that is the most important. So get exposed to it during the day, bright light, especially natural light, right? For all of those reasons we talked about, both for your vitamin D, both for eliminating seasonal depression, both for setting our clocks so we're active, we're energetic, we're ready to go, we're getting at it. And then at night, we got to cue this down, right? Just like when the sun goes down naturally at sunset, our pineal gland wants to secrete that melatonin. That's the appropriate time. So, getting rid of the blue light at night as best we can, blue light blockers, trying to have a couple-hour window before bed where we're not being exposed to these blue lights. Getting red light, if you need to do stuff, either buy the light bulbs that have the red lights, or just like I do, the simpler feature is just don't turn on the overhead lights, and you can walk around with a headlamp like I do oftentimes at night, which was my $15 solution. So anyway, so important, so many benefits, and I can promise you that this is the single most important thing that we can do to improve and enhance our circadian rhythm is free. It is light. Monitoring our light exposure. Isn't that cool? Isn't that amazing? Isn't that awesome? So I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. I got to make a trip. We're having a family trip out to Florida, and our time zones are going to be jacked up by a few hours. And so I'm going to try a couple of these apps, and I'll try to give you some feedback in the Modern Medicine Movement Health and Wellness Facebook group, which ones I found to be most helpful. I may take a little melatonin with me just in case. I try not to take it if I don't have to, but sometimes you got to get your sleep, right? Like we've talked about, it's so beneficial to get good quality sleep. Your 7 to 8 hours, it affects so many things in your life. And so that's a priority for me. But what I've realized is that simplicity, and especially paying attention to the circadian rhythm, is at the root and at the heart, and is the most single important thing with respect to this. So don't spend billions of dollars like they're trying to get you to spend on the sleep industry, if you will, right? What did I say? I mean, billions and billions, $432 billion last year were spent, on all these different sleep aids. And what did I spend? I think I spent $15, right, on one of these headlamps. And it's been super helpful, limiting my blue light exposure, trying to get my blue light and bright light exposure in the day and not at night has been life-changing for me. So I hope that's helpful for you. I hope it's of value. Tell me your feedback, what you've been able to glean over your years with all these sleep things that are out there, what's worked for you, what hasn't, and try the simplest one, right? The Occam's razor approach. Try really trying to optimize your exposure to light, getting lots of bright light in the daytime when you're up and about doing stuff, working, getting it done, having it just get you active, optimized, mentally sharp and focused. And then when the time comes, when it's evening, try to settle it down and eliminate as best you can the blue lights, because that is the single most important thing you can do. And I promise you, it will make a big difference. And most of all, Not only is it simple, but for the most part, it's free. That's the kind of stuff I love. The simple and free stuff that makes big difference in your life. So a big aloha to everybody out there. Thanks again for listening. Reach out to me, Modern Medicine Movement Podcast at Gmail, or on Facebook, Modern Medicine Movement Podcast, or at Aloha Surf Doc. Tell me what you're learning. Tell me what you'd like to learn, things that interest you, and I'll try to podcast about it. And share alike, because that's how we get the word out. I love you guys. Aloha.